Again, we want to welcome everybody here tonight to our 7th installment of Kingston's Buried Treasures. We want to thank you all for coming. The series gets bigger and bigger, and we appreciate your patronage, and we appreciate being able to spread the word about some of Kingston's buried treasures. And tonight is a very appropriate subject, because when you think of Kingston, what do you think of?
Bluestone.
Bluestone. Bluestone. No, you think of pre-faded, acid-wash cargo shorts, right? And that brings us to our subject tonight, Ezra Fitch, the Fitch and founder of Abercrombie and Fitch. Kingston resident. He actually lived right in the corner of Maiden Lane and Fair Street. And our presenter tonight, we are incredibly proud to have. Everybody here, I'm sure, knows Ed Ford, our Kingston City historian. We have an overflowing crowd tonight because for anybody who is interested in the history of our area, Ed is a rock star. Ed is. And I'll tell you that whenever I'm discussing history with somebody and I say something, they say, that can't possibly be true. And I say, well, Ed Ford told me that. And that stops the conversation right there, whether Ed told me or not. So Ed, I apologize. I do use that. So we are very, very fortunate. Ed really is, he is truly one of Kingston's treasures. He really is. Not buried. Not buried. Ed really fought the good fight to save Kingston's, the legacy of our history for many years when he was the only one doing it. And we owe him a debt of gratitude that we can never pay. He's been a wonderful help and inspiration to me. We're proud to have him. And Ed, as Hugh Reynolds just informed me, Ed is the only presenter we have had that was alive when the subject was alive. So Ed is very proud of that. So without further ado, I'd like to present Ed Ford, our Kingston City historian, and our featured speaker tonight on Ezra Fitch.
Thank you, Paul. Well, you're lucky tonight. There are 2 Ezra Fitches. So I know you paid a lot to get in here, but you're going to get twice as much for your money as you would ordinarily. So excuse me, I got to make sure I'm all set here. I think so. There are 2 Fitches. Ezra Fitches. One was the grandfather, and the other was the grandson. So I debated on which one to talk about first, and that was. I looked in my old clipping files of old newspapers, and I came up with a little story, and I think that'll help me. Years ago, a farmer and his son were out in the field clearing the land for a crop and removing stones from the site. And out in the middle of the lot, they ran into a great big stone that they couldn't move. So the farmer said to his son, "Go to the barn and fetch the horse." So the son said, all right. So he started out, and he got about halfway to the barn, and he called back to his father, and he said, "Which horse do you want, father, the old horse or the young horse?" And so the farmer said, "Well, you know my motto, use the old things first." So the young man started to come back to his father, and farmer says, "Well, what are you coming back here for?" He said, "I know your motto, so you go and fetch the horse." So we'll start with Ezra Fitch the first. He was born in 1805 in Coxsackie, New York, and came down here when down to, I say, Kingston and Wilbur, when the Delaware and Hudson Canal started in 1828. And he had 2 relatives with him. And one was Roswell Reed, and he was, and also another one, Theron Skeel. And they were all from Coxsackie, all in the freighting and shipping business. And they came to Wilbur to see what they could do in that particular site. They were going. The Reed and Skeel were running. Skeel and Skeel was running the dock. Reed and Fitch were running ships up the Hudson River and down to New York, and also having sloops on the Rondout Creek and canal boats on the canal. So in 1829, the first steamboat came up to Wilbur, and you probably wonder why they didn't land in Rondout instead of Wilbur, but the Broadway Hill, which is so steep, was a hindrance to horses and heavily laden wagons, and they just couldn't traverse that. And so Wilbur Avenue became the transportation area for mostly all produce, and Wilbur started to grow up into a thriving community. It was first called Twelfthskill Landing, and Twelfthskill, named for the brook that goes along Wilbur Avenue, was named because the Dutch, when they came here, they would find fish in some of the streams that they didn't understand what they were. They didn't see them in Europe, and so they would number them. And they numbered the bass that were in the creek there at the Rondout, Twelfthskill Creek. The 12th is Dutch for 12, because there were 6 stripes on each side of a bass fish. And so that was called, the landing was called Twelfthskill Landing. Then it became Wilbur when a developer came in 1830 and bought up a lot of land, but he didn't last too long. He went bankrupt, and so some of this land went on to some of the other people. And Theron Skeel, who was an in-law of Ezra Fitch and Roswell Reed, owned the dock that was right where this, as you can see, the site of the where the Bluestone industry came later. And so Ezra Fitch decided that it was time in early 1830s and beginning of 1840 to have a Bluestone yard. And he started out there with Reed apparently owned the land along with Fitch, but Roswell Reed never did take part in it. But Ezra Fitch, with his brother Simeon and his cousin William B. Fitch, started the Bluestone industry that came down on the creek. Now let's see if I can do this. Well, that's the picture you got, right? And so I'll tell you about that. This picture and the sheets that you have all came out of the 1875 Beers Atlas. And the original atlas is twice as big as that sheet. In other words, that's 11 by 17, 22 by 34. Great big picture. But I was absolutely amazed when I looked at that picture, that engraving with a magnifier, to see that you can almost see expressions on the faces of some of the men that man had drawn for that. And I looked also to see if they would tell you who did the illustration, but they didn't. And I'm sorry about that, because I think that was a work of art, to say the least. So anyway, that was the beginning of the Bluestone industry. Well, very shortly, Ezra Fitch decided that he needed a boat, and he had built a boat, and he called it the Santa Claus. Why he wanted to call it that, I have no idea. He was going to call it St. Nicholas in the beginning, but somebody else had that name. So he had to, he resorted to Santa Claus. So we hired a very renowned artist, John Vanderlyn Jr., the nephew of our famous John Vanderlyn, to paint on the paddle boards on the side of the boat. You know, it had the big paddle wheels on the side that were covered up. So he had those painted, and here's some of the things of what he had put on there. I don't know if there's any existing painting of that because it was so early that there didn't seem to be any photography. But when he started, he put a tile roof, a chimney, down which Santa Claus was about to descend, with toys bulging over his shoulder from his ample pack. And nearby was a sleigh with its team of reindeer. The painting on the other panel showed Santa Claus in a room in the house about to ascend the chimney after filling all the children's stockings. And in the salon hung a painting of the jolly old man about to descend the chimney all over again. Then as a change, atop the pilot house was a figure of Cupid with his bows and arrows. Now, whether he was delving into Valentine's Day, I don't know. But that was maybe a reminder that Christmas was the season of love. So Ezra Fitch ran that boat for probably 10 years, and then he sold the Santa Claus to Thomas Cornell in 1853. And that boat was put together with another boat and combined, and I think that was probably the end of the drawings and everything on the Santa Claus. But across the street, from the Bluestone yard, Fitch built a large 3-story frame building, and he called it the Santa Claus Hotel. And that's where the crew would stay when they were not in port and they were not out on duty and on the boat. And so I heard from a man about maybe 30, 40 years ago, time flies, but 30, 40 years ago, who lived in there. And his name was George Tong. And he told me that his ancestors had lived in that hotel there and had bought it. And so I said, well, I'd like to meet you sometime, but I never met him. But I said, what's your wife's name? He says, Tilly. I said, oh, Tilly Tong. And I said, well, what a name for it. But I didn't say that to him, of course. But anyway, that was the only connection I had with it. That building was torn down probably in the 60s or 70s by the Lawless family, who I think were related to the Berardis that did the Bluestone building. Then, let's see. Now, Ezra Fitch retired in Coxsackie in 1854, and his brother Simeon now ran the Bluestone office in New York, while his cousin William B. Fitch conducted the Wilbur Bluestone operation. In 1870, the office for the Bluestone was built, and that's what it looked like, and it was called at the time, and only cost $10,000 for that building, that it was the finest office building in Ulster County. And it was all designed by noted architect in Kingston and Poughkeepsie, J.A. Wood. As some of you know some of those. The J.A. Wood designed, for example, the Albany Avenue Baptist Church. He did over St. Joseph's Church when it had been an armory after the Civil War to become a Catholic church. Several of the armory that was in Midtown Broadway. Lots of things. J.A. Wood was the designer of that, and he was the designer of this building as well. The Fitch Bluestone industry kept building up, and let's see if I got another picture in here. Oh, here's another one down here. Kept building up, and it became the largest Bluestone owner in the whole area, if not the whole Hudson Valley. Excuse me, I got to get a drink. Well, the Fitches kind of passed on. Ezra Fitch, after he retired, he died in Coxsackie in 1870. Simeon Fitch, he lasted until 1877, and William B. Fitch to 1890. But by that time, the Bluestone industry was slowing down. Concrete had come in to replace it, and things were pretty well finished by that time. And the only thing I ran across was the two daughters of William B. Fitch, Charlotte and Rebecca, who were belles of the ball here in society in Kingston when they lived here. When they got older, one was in a nursing home and the other one, who knows where, they sued each other because they said each one was taking too much money. So I think that's probably what happened to the money anyway. After many years of neglect, I haven't known him. I thought I had another picture, but we'll go back to that one. After many years of neglect, the Bluestone office building was restored by James and Alice Berardi around 1879, something around that time. And I beg your pardon, 19, of course. And I remember that they had an open house after they had it all done, and they invited everybody to come and look at it and see what they had done. And I think it was something like 3,000 of us showed up. I didn't think you expected anything like that. And when you walked up the stairs, it was quite a narrow stairway, and it was right against the wall. The people coming down on the wall side were rubbing against the wallpaper. I think he had to replace all that wallpaper and replace his rugs on the floor because there were 3,000 people tramping in there. But I'm sure he was proud of what he had there, and we were thankful that we could see it. Was there anybody here that had gone there at all? Saw that? Okay. Am I right about that? The way it looked? Yeah, it was beautiful. Now we'll get to, if I can do it. The grandson, and I'll put him on. Hey, this thing works. I never did one of these things before. And it's magic. Ezra Hasbrook Fitch, grandson of Ezra Fitch, was born at Coxsackie, Greene County, in 1865. He was the only child of Roswell Reed Fitch and Margaretta Hasbrook. Ezra's mother died shortly after his birth, in fact, only a few months, and his father didn't remarry until 1873. So that meant that Ezra Hasbrook was a baby, and who took care of him? I don't know. His grandfather, grandmother, they were there maybe. Some of the family. It wasn't until his father got married again in 1873 that he had a home by them. And so I thought it was kind of rough. But he grew up apparently on his grandfather's estate up in Coxsackie, and learned all about the outdoors and so forth, and became very interested in it. Now I also, in this book that I looked at, Commemorative Biographical Record of Ulster County, they had about the Fitch family. It was something. The Fitch genealogy goes about back to Adam and Eve. I'm telling you, my eyes glazed over when I looked at Edward I in 1292. They're talking not that he was a relative, but some Fitches were there during that reign, and so I waded through all that, and I found nothing of any great interest. That was 1292 is 200 years before Columbus even got here. So anyway, what I did find was that a Fitch widow, and they didn't name her, which I wish they had and 5 sons, and they didn't name them either, emigrated to Connecticut in 1630. And that's where the Fitches started in the United States. Actually, I'd been trying to find out if John Fitch, the inventor of the steamboat, was a relative, and of course they didn't mention that. So apparently not. But at any rate, that's enough for the genealogy. Ezra Fitch spent his early years on the Fitch estate, as I said, with his grandfather. And a teenager, he went to school partly in New York City sometime and sometimes in Canada. His father, Roswell, was president of the Bay of Fundy Quarrying Company, which had a large line of schooners and steamboats and everything up and down from Canada to New York City. Let's see if I got that. Here's going to take 2 pages. I'm sorry I had to sit down, but I don't think I could stand up for 4 hours like this is going to be. Now Roswell, his father, died in 1888, and the next year Ezra Fitch went to California and engaged with a company doing general merchandise in the San Joaquin Valley. He was pretty sharp, I guess, because in a couple of years, 2 or 3, he became manager of the company's stores in the whole valley, a series of them. But in 1892, he returned to New York City to study law at New York Law School. And, he said that he was that's probably when he met David Abercrombie, who had founded a small sporting goods store in Lower Manhattan. Now, Ezra was admitted to the bar in 1895 and immediately opened a law office in Kingston, adjoining the Ulster County Clerk's office. And I think I got a picture of that one. There, I think I got it a little late. That was the law office that he had practiced in. The building on the left is the old county clerk's office that was there before the county office building. It's there now. And that was a solid building, that county clerk's office. There was all cement and granite. But anyway, that's where Ezra practiced law for a while here when he was in Kingston. And he met a man, another lawyer, that he got along pretty well with by the name of James Jenkins. And the two of them decided to do some real estate, building some houses. So they did, and in the middle here, 1897, Ezra had married Sarah Huntington Sturgis, and they lived on Maiden Lane, corner of Fair Street. And so that's a great big house, a great big yellow house on the corner of Fair and Maiden Lane. Partnering with the lawyer James Jenkins, Fitch remodeled 23 Pearl Street into the Huntington Hotel. And I don't know if you remember that one or not. It's now a parking lot for St. James Methodist Church. And so it was a great big house, great big hotel. It was kind of it was used early on by rich people who retired, and we didn't have many nursing homes like that, I don't think. But at any rate, with one man that lived there that I thought was quite interesting was Admiral Higginson. And I remember him going to the Old Dutch Church, stately man. He lived until the 1930s, 32, and I was a kid. And I can remember him stalking up the middle aisle and didn't look right or left at anybody. But he was the rear admiral in charge of the battleship Massachusetts in the Spanish-American War in the Battle of Santiago. And so he lived there and his wife for about 20 years in that Huntington Hotel. Now, Huntington was named for Sarah Huntington Sturgis. That was her middle name. So that's where they got that from. And the ones that owned the building were owned that same law office that he would practice in that I showed you before. Now, you wonder what he did when he was here. So do I. He did do. They built several buildings along and around Warren Street and Wall Street, but I guess he got tired of it after a while. But Ezra Fitch served for 10 years in Company A, 7th Regiment in New York, so he was there back and forth. He was very active in everything pertaining to military matters of the regiment. He was always an enthusiast in rifle shooting, having been on the regimental team. He was one of a team of 5 which in the winter of 1892 and 3 broke all records of rifle practice ever made in the 7th Regiment Armory. Whether that still stands, I have no idea. But it could. He was a 32nd degree Mason, a member of Kingston Lodge number 10, the 7th Regiment Veterans Club, the Kingston Club, which was local here, the Round Out Canoe Club, the 12th Skill Golf Club. Well, that'll please somebody because he was here 1892, 3, 4. They're trying to get the history of back as far as they can to see if it's the oldest golf club in the Hudson Valley, at least. And the other one was the Pansy Golf Club, whatever that was. Maybe for sissies, I don't know. But after a while, here, by 1898, Ezra and Sarah left Kingston and moved to New York City. According to the records, and Paul won't like this, but it says that he was sick and tired of his lawyer profession.
I agree.
But he left his. But anyway, he went back to New York and he renewed his acquaintance with David Abercrombie, who had that small store in Lower Manhattan. So anyway, they became partners, and they called it Abercrombie and Fitch. Now I think I got something there for this one. Well, I got him anyway. Now maybe I got, and so they became partners, but they didn't agree. Fitch wanted to expand. He wanted to had ideas for selling things differently, and Abercrombie just wanted to keep a small store and cater to the elite and specialties and let it go with that. But so I looked up about David T. Abercrombie. I wanted to find out a little bit about him. He was born in Baltimore, Maryland in June of 1867. While attending at Baltimore City College, he majored in civil engineering and topography. He was a trapper, a prospector. He was a prospector, topographer, railroad surveyor. He was also an inventor. He was an ingenious design of his of tents and haversacks and other camping equipment. It was his love of the outdoors that inspired him to begin Abercrombie Company, a shop dedicated to selling the highest quality camping, fishing, and hunting gear. His clientele consisted mostly of professional hunters and trappers, but they didn't agree. So they decided to dissolve, and David Abercrombie sold Abercrombie Company to Abercrombie and Fitch to Fitch. The store continued under Fitch's tutelage and became bigger. Ezra Fitch was a determined innovator. As a result of his determination, hard work, and will, what he created was no ordinary sporting goods store. Fitch was determined that the store have an outdoors feeling. Stock was not hidden behind cabinets, glass cabinets. Instead, it was displayed as if in use. He set up a tent and equipped it as if it were out in the middle of the wilds. A campfire blazed in one corner, of course with an experienced guide always on hand. The clerks hired in A&F were not professional salesmen, but rugged outdoorsmen. Talking about was their pleasure, and selling was only performed at the customer's insistence. You know, I got to thinking, isn't it like that in a big box store now? Don't you have to insist that you want to buy something, and nobody's going to wait on you? But at any rate, he started something there. By 1913, I thought I got a picture here someplace of, wait a minute. That's one of the Abercrombie Fitch stores. That was one of the early ones. And now this I got a kick out of. This was an early catalog in 1903 when they were still together. And you probably can't see what that says. But there's two bad guys in the front, one with a pistol in his hand. And up in the back is a guy coming on a horse or mule with a pack and all that on another one. And so this one bad guy says, "Do you think he has any gold?" And the other one says, "He has better than gold." What's that? An outfit from Abercrombie and Fitch. So that's one of their catalogs. I only got one more, which was 1930, and that's all guns. And that was after he wasn't even there. But anyway, they put out catalogs, and the catalogs, orders were flowing in. By 1917, Abercrombie and Fitch moved to Madison Avenue and 45th Street, where it occupied the entire 12-story building and had become the largest sporting goods store in the world. A log cabin was built on the roof, which Fitch used as a townhouse. Next to it, he had a casting pool installed where fishermen could sample the store's collection of rods and reels. In the basement was an armored rifle range set up. There was also a golf school, a floor dedicated to perfectly set up camps, a dog and cat kennel. A&F had a selection of exotic sporting equipment, hot air balloons, yachting pennants, portable trampolines, treadmills for exercising dogs, throwing knives, shirts of chainmail. You know, I often wondered where I could find a chainmail shirt, whether I ever want one. What is that for? Must be for a sport or some kind. And everything else, they had everything in there for falconry and whatever. So A&F outfitted many hunting and exploration expeditions. Theodore Roosevelt, his trip to Africa and the Amazon, Robert Peary's expedition to the North Pole, clients after Fitch's retirement. Some of these were after he was gone, but the store was there. Ernest Hemingway, Presidents Taft, Harding, Hoover, Eisenhower, Kennedy, Amelia Earhart, Bing Crosby, Duke of Windsor, Howard Hughes, and Cole Porter even ordered his evening clothes there. And somebody told me Lindbergh, but I thought about Lindbergh. You know, when he took that flight to Paris, I bet he didn't even have underwear on. He had a a plane full of gasoline that he could hardly get off the ground, I wouldn't think he would want anything that was heavy or anything whatsoever. But hey, we'll see. Now the first mahjong set. Whoop, here's some of those clothing earlier on, 1920. Joe told me to put those in. I don't know what they dated that is. Now there's another storefront. Maybe that's the Fifth Avenue one. They say I've never been in one, but they say the store is very dark, loud music, and I don't know what else. Oh, how about that one? See what else I got. There's the mahjong. The first mahjong set sold in the United States were sold by Abercrombie and Fitch, 1920. Became a success, and Ezra Fitch sent emissaries to China, to all the towns, to buy every mahjong set they could find. And A&F sold a total of 12,000 sets. Well, that was probably a lot for that time. And even had hit songs recorded about the mahjong fad. There are now mahjong cruises, tournaments. Mahjong, as of 2010, is the most popular table game in Japan, with 8 million players. In Japan, with a total of 300 billion in sales. Studies by doctors in Hong Kong have shown that that mahjong is beneficial for cognitive and memory difficulties. So anyway, that's the mahjong theory, and it was started by A&F. 1928, Fish retired from the business to enjoy his remaining years in the great outdoors that he loved so much. He died on his yacht in Santa Barbara, California, June 16, 1930. His body was returned to this area in several weeks, and he's buried in the Fairview Cemetery in Stone Ridge. And when the weather gets better, we're going to go out and see if we can find that and see what it looks like. Now, Ezra Fitch is attributed with much of the company's growth in its early years. A collection of now defunct upscale apparel and fragrances were introduced, and there was an Ezra Fitch clothing line, a Ezra Fitch cologne, and Ezra Fitch perfume. In the late 1960s, the store went bankrupt, and bankrupt in 1977. Since 1977, the company has consistently kept a high profile in the public eye due to its advertising, its philanthropy, and its involvement in legal conflicts over clothing style and employment practices. The company has been accused of promoting the sexualization of pre-teenage girls by marketing thongs to 10-year-olds and padded bikinis to 7-year-olds. In 2011, no, that's in 2011. In 2004, a lawsuit the company was accused of discriminating against African Americans, Latinos, Asian Americans, and women. And you know what it cost them? $40 million. They did. Because they were offering sales positions to whites and men, and that was a class action suit, and that was $40 million. 2002, and A&F sold a shirt featuring the slogan, two Chinese men, Wong Brothers Laundry Services, two Wongs can make a white. They withdrew it. They had to withdraw that one. 2009, the company filed a lawsuit against Beyonce. Beyonce, I don't have a picture of Beyonce. to stop her from marketing a fragrance named Sasha Fierce, claiming infringement on the A&F's Fierce trademark. Well, I don't know. It doesn't say what happened to that. So, she might have had to stop doing that. 2005, Women and Girls Foundation launched a girl cot. They wouldn't call it a boycott, of course. Girl cot, so the girls wouldn't go in there, to protest the sale of T-shirts with the slogan, "Who needs brains when you have these?" That was withdrawn the next day. 2008, ANF agreed to give $10 million donation in Columbus, Ohio, to rename its emergency room Abercrombie and Fitch Trauma Center. That was turned down. I don't think so. But I will ask you a question right now. What do you think of Abercrombie and Fitch Health Alliance? $10 million? You have to think about that. So that's all I have.
Do we have any questions for Ed?
Yes, is the company still independent or is it part of a larger conglomerate?
They had merged and been sold out about 3 times since they went bankrupt. And I think the man that's listed in 2011 and 12 is still in charge of it. And it seems right through that particular era is when they got in trouble with their advertising. But whether they've started to concentrate on stores across in Europe and Asia and Africa, all over. And so they've got quite a lot there. They did close some stores here in America, but they still have maybe 1,000 stores left. So they're still going. And as I say, I've never been in one, and maybe I'll do that sometime.
There's actually one in the Poughkeepsie Mall,
Yeah,
in the Galleria.
okay.
You have a question?
I am mistaken. I have the history of Abercrombie and Fitch from about 1940 to 1953.
Yeah,
And if you look in the city directories
yeah.
for the 1930s, you see there are 5 shipyards listed for Kingston.
Oh,
And one of them was Roundout Boat Builders, which was the man that ended up owning the Stitch stone building there. And it happened. My name is Dwyer, and we're long downtown people. A man by the name of John Weber, the Webers were a family here, but in the 1930s, John Weber ended up being 50% stockholder in Dwyer Brothers.
Oh.
Dwyer Brothers did not refer to my father and his brother Phil, and it belongs to the generation prior to that. And he married the only daughter of Robert Dwyer, and Robert Dwyer had that house on Broadway that I pointed out to one time. Anyway, the man's name was Lansdale Christie. And I just happened to be looking, trying to find if there's any relation to the Christie that's now the governor. But this Lansdale Christie, he was pals with John Weber, and I like to go boarding. He was really a New York band, but he'd come up here for business and they go out on a scoot. John Weber was claimed to be one of the first troopers in the area. So he was certainly an early trooper, but whether he was the first under it, I don't know. But after his father-in-law died, I don't know whether he waited for the wife to die, but he came down to the store one day and hung up his jacket and he said, "Where's my desk?" So they had to find something for him to do. They put him in charge of buying nuts and bolts and lumber for the shipyard.
Well, thank you, Peter.
I just one of
Okay.
Lansdale Christie gone 3 years to West Point, and he was in the scow business, really. That's a flat barge. And by 1942, he wasn't operating his. He was operating. He was bringing his wires to get repaired. And anyway, he got a colonelcy, direct commission, because of the West Point experience. And he was in 1942 on the invasion of North Africa. And he made a deal, found out they had very rich iron over there. And he made a deal with, I think Selassie or whoever the emperor was Liberia at the time, and he mortgaged everything he had in New York. And bought rice, and he imported rice, and he got all the mineral rights for iron ore. And he started a company that he was a subsidiary really of Public Steel. And by 1953, he was a multi-millionaire.
Oh.
And he had a daughter my age who was finished 2 years at junior college over in Millbrook. And I drove her down Easter weekend, 1953. I drove down to West Point. She was already hooked up with a cadet there. They were going to get married that year, so.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that. Very interesting. You? Here you go.
Ed, are you aware of any famous descendants that ever?
No. No. I'm not aware of any. I looked in the directories. I don't find any at all. And not aware of any. I hope there are, but I don't know.
Any other questions? It's not often you get Ed here, so believe me, he is a wealth of knowledge. No other questions?
That's all right.
Well, Ed, thank you. Thank you very, very much. Thank you. And again, Ed is an unbelievable fountain of knowledge, and I will tell you from my personal experience, he avails himself to anybody who asks. And please, I'm sure, I will tell you, when I took the position at Commissioner Juror's office, I wanted to do a history of the courthouse for the jurors. It gave me an opportunity to call Ed Ford, who I'd known of for years, but I never had I didn't want to bother him, and I never really had an opportunity. I saw that as a wonderful opportunity to give him a call. Ed had me over, sat down, and I will tell you, for anybody who has already been in, and if you haven't been in as a juror, you're going to be in at some point. The presentation that I give in the history of the courthouse is based largely on the information Ed gave me. So Ed and all of our presenters, they are a wealth of knowledge, and we all love history. Everybody here loves history, and the presenters especially. So ask them. This is what we're trying to do, is to keep our local history alive, and to give credit and honor some of the people who've come in ahead of us. I will tell you, I will not see Abercrombie and Fitch the same way again after tonight, but that doesn't diminish at all what Ezra Fitch did. He did an amazing thing. He made one of the largest clothing companies in the world, and he was from right down the road. If he knew what they were selling now, I think he would be very upset, but that doesn't dispute it. I also would be remiss if I did not bring up this book, Streetwise, W-H-Y-S. This is a book written by Ed Ford, and I'll tell you, if you are interested in the history of our area, there is no better primer than that book. The book tells you the stories of how each street in Kingston got their name. They're all named after people in our community. So he tells you a little bit about how it got its name, and a little bit about who was living there at certain times. So it's a wonderful book, and if you're kind and you ask him, I'm sure he will sign your book. He signed mine. Ted Dietz also has a number of publications that are wonderful. If you ever get a chance, these are great books on the history of our area. Okay, I want to tell you, before we leave, if I can let everybody know our upcoming features. March 15th, very appropriate, we will be having a presentation on John Vanderlyn. We are in the Vanderlyn Gallery of the Senate House Museum. We are actually in the midst of the largest collection of Vanderlyn works in the world. And I don't think you'd have a hard time looking at that picture over there, the large picture, and not see that as a Hudson River School painting. Years before Thomas Cole began the Hudson River School painting. So he was, during his time, he certainly remains one of the most important artists of our nation, and during his time, he was one of the greatest artists in the world. So Joe Tantillo, who's also a member of Kingston's Buried Treasures, will be presenting on that. And Joe, all the media and pictures we have here, Joe puts together the PowerPoint presentations. Joe came up with the logo. Pat Murphy, who's sitting back there, actually came up with the name Kingston's Buried Treasure, which is a wonderful name. So please join us on March 15th. The next series after that, April 19th of 2013, will be a presentation on the history of the Ulster County Courthouse done by myself. So anybody with enough time, free time, can become an amateur historian. So I hope you learn something then. We hope you join us for that presentation as well. Before we leave, I do want to just thank a few people who make this series possible. I want to thank Ed Ford and all of our speakers that we have. They really give a lot of their time and their effort to help us. I love coming here. I learn more in the hour that we're here than I've learned in my entire life on these subjects. And I'll be honest with you, I don't really want to do all the research. It's great that we're able to benefit from this. So please take the time and thank them. They do put in a lot of effort. The Senate House Museum, again, they allow us to have these presentations here. They're closed for the season. They open up especially for us, and they set up. So please thank them. Tom Kernan, Jacob is here. They really do a great job for us. Bob Rizzo, Bob tapes all of these presentations. Bob spent his career with NBC. He's a true professional. He does a wonderful job. And anybody who wants to get a copy of this presentation, Bob does make those, so just contact Bob. You can meet him after. There's a lot of people who publicize this event for all of us, and many of you, I'm sure, have seen that in some of these publications. Hugh Reynolds, who is always here, he's been at every event. He, in fact, modified his arrangements to be here tonight, and he always runs a big spread in the Kingston Times. So we want to thank Hugh. Jillian Fisher, she sends out emails. Many of you may have gotten them. She has been wonderful helping us. Friends of Historic Kingston, they also put us up on the website, and they go out of their way to really help. They promote all of Kingston's history, and they really help us out a lot. Ulster County Tourism, Kingston Community Radio, Kingston Happenings, the Daily Freeman Preview, you may have seen this event in their calendars. Walt Wachowski and the Civil War Roundtable, they also put up our information on their Facebook page. And we have a Facebook page as well that you can visit. Joe Tantillo has created that. And I also want to thank Kingston's Buried Treasures, because the people in Kingston's Buried Treasure put a lot of effort into this, and it's really become a wonderful series, and it's thanks to them. Ed Ford, we have Pat Murphy, Joe Tantillo, Ann Gordon, who's our Ulster County historian, Nina Posupak, who's the Ulster County clerk. She's not here tonight. Tom Hoffey, who's one of our city aldermen, and all of you. We appreciate you being here. And as long as you continue to come and find it interesting, we'll keep doing it, because there is an endless supply of subjects in our community that have contributed not only, again, to our community, but to New York State and to the nation and to the world. It's an unbelievable place we live in. I don't think you would find a place like Kingston in the rest of the country. I mean, Ezra Fitch, the man started Abercrombie and Fitch. He lived in Kingston. And some of these people did amazing things and then came back here and lived here. They chose to make their lives here. George Sharp, a prior subject, an incredibly important person. He could have been anywhere, but he chose to stay here and make his life here. And it's because it's such a special place. And it's a special place because of these people and because of you. So again, we thank you. We hope you enjoyed it. We hope to see you next month.